Good day. Today we're going to be looking at Solidworks 2023 and creating a basic drawing shape like you see here. Your first projects in the class are creating some basic shape developments, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to develop a 3D part drawing like you see in the isometric. Don't worry too much about the orthographic and the dimensions just yet, but we'll kind of tuck this over here in the corner and use that as a reference guide, and it's probably going to pop behind the Solidworks software here, and I'll bring it back up when we need it to review some of the drawing dimension sizes. So your first project is basically initially what I would do personally is, since it's an isometric drawing and you're counting squares, is sketch out what you see. And so as you can see, if we were to look at this object, this isometric object, and sketch out the front face, this is the front face that you would see, the shape. Now why would that be the front face? The front face is typically the most complex shape, or it's the longest shape. Those are the two general rules that are focusing on how you select the front of an object shape. So since this has the most complex shape, and you can see what, if you were to look from the top, what that would look like, and if you were to look from the right hand side, sure, you'd see, you know, a rectangle here and a rectangle here and a rectangle in the middle, and you'd have dotted lines for the holes. But realistically, the shape itself is a rectangle, so you wouldn't see the arc or the curve on the front edge of the object or anything like that. So selecting that front view is really important, because when you begin drawing the 3D model, you use that front view as your starting shape because it's the most complex. In that way, you sketch out in 2 dimensions the most complex shape first. Alright, so let's get started, and we'll walk you through the basics of the Solidworks software tools to sketch out the front of this shape, okay, with the circle in the middle. Don't worry too much about the dimensions. You can add the dimensions afterward that you're going to see. So it's all about getting the shape of the object correct. And we'll show you a couple of tricks along the way as we go. Now, getting started in SolidWorks, you've got 2 options. You can hit the house over on the far left-hand side, or right next to it, you've got the new sheet with the down arrow. And if you hit the down arrow, it's going to say, all right, we're going to create a new object. You can see that the image went away and tucked it behind the SolidWorks right now. The third option is to open up an existing drawing, and you can browse your recent documents that you've created or recent folders that you've opened, so forth. The fourth icon that's grayed out right now is the save icon, and so save as gives you the ability to save it with a name, and that's really important. And then printing out your drawing environments, whether it's the isometric shape or the orthographic with the dimensions, those are all there. And then you've got undo and redo. So those are the basic operating tools up top. So we're going to go ahead and get started by hitting the house. Now when you hit the house, you can see that my most recent drawings that I've created included the shape that I just showed you. Typically, when I'm doing these videos, I draw it from scratch, and it's live, and if there's a mistake, we'll fix it on the fly. But since I've just drawn the part, I know where all the little hiccups may occur, and like I said, we'll show you some tricks on making this a little bit easier of a shape. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and begin a brand new part. Now there's parts, assemblies, and drawings. So parts are individual objects. Assemblies are multiple parts. So if you know that you're going to be creating multiple parts in a single object shape, meaning you've got multiple parts to an assembly, you want to use the assembly tool. And you can draw the parts individually and bring them into the assembly, or you can draw the parts in the assembly. And we'll talk about that in a future video as we go forward. And the last option is creating a drawing, which is the two-dimensional shape imagery like we showed you of that isometric three-dimensional part. So this is a drawing, that's a part. So the part's the 3D model, the drawing is developed from the part. So we're going to go ahead and begin a brand new part. Once the software launches, what will happen is that on the right hand side we usually get a pop-up that shows, there we go, the design library tools. Don't worry too much about the design library tools right now. We're not worried about that in our development. On the left hand side we have our structure of our part development. This is important, and we'll talk more about how the structure of the parts get built as we go along. And there's different tools that you can use within that structure of that part that you're developing. The feature, sketch, markup, evaluate, MBD, Solidworks add-ins. Typically we're going to be focusing on the features and the sketch tools, and what that does is that brings up a ribbon. Okay, so those ribbons, let's go ahead and anchor the ribbon. If your ribbon doesn't anchor, like you saw mine pop up and go away, there's a little push pin on the side, and you can push pin that command manager so this ribbon doesn't go away. So as you select each of these features, that ribbon will stay up in that location. So what's interesting is that the features is the first tab, but realistically we have to start with a sketch. So there's basically 3 steps to how we create a 3D model. We sketch, we add dimensions, and then we create the 3D model. The add dimensions, we also add constraints, and so we'll talk more about what a constraint is. But right now, for our needs, a dimension is the constraint. So that way it holds its shape. And so we begin with the sketch. So the feature is creating the actual 3D model. The sketch is what we use to develop the two-dimensional shape to create that feature. So when we choose sketch, we're going to go ahead and use and create a brand new sketch, because there is no sketch out on our sheet right now. There's nothing. I mean, it's just a blank space of an area. So we choose the sketch tool first to get started. And when we do that, we've got 3 surfaces that we can create. And if you remember going back to that image, we can, let me pop the image up here, we can see that the surfaces correspond with the front, the top, and the right-hand side of an isometric drawing. So front, top, and right plane. So front, the top, and the right side of the plane, if you look at that isometric image on the far right-hand side. So in essence, we can begin with the front plane. Many times you'll begin with that front plane because that's, again, where we typically would start our drawing shape. Now sometimes we'll also create it on the top plane and extrude from there too. So there's no right or wrong. You can pick either one right now, but we'll just pick the front plane. So in the front plane, you'll see the little red icon here. That's the 0, 0, 0 location. And there's 3 zeros. It's X, Y, and Z, because we're working in 3 dimensions now. So it's not just a 2-dimensional environment. We're now working in the 3-dimensional environment. So with that, we'll begin our sketch. And our sketch is going to begin on that 0, 0, 0 location. But we have to select something to sketch. Now there's a couple of ways that we can create this particular shape. What I'm going to do is we're going to begin with the line command, and we'll pick the line command, and we'll start the line command. And how do we select things? We left mouse click and release. When we right mouse click, it's typically going to bring up options on the screen. So these are all left mouse clicks that I do to start and stop the line. So we left mouse click to start. We draw the line. Now, as I mentioned earlier, don't worry too much about the length of the line. What we try to do is get the shape right. So we're trying to keep the line horizontal. We don't want an angled line. We'd like to keep it horizontal. And we're just going to draw it out here. We'll say 1.4 or 1.3, whatever. Again, that's not critical right now. And we're going to draw a rectangle. So we're going to go straight up. 1.5, that's good. And then we'll come back around. And as you know, as you see, as we draw straight, we now have a projection. And when we hit the original starting 0, 0, 0 vertical line, it gives us the heads up. Hey, that's the same spot that we began from. So we'll left mouse click and anchor there and come back down and anchor at the original. Now, with those 4 lines, it actually stopped the drawing environment. Yes and no. We have one more step to do. We're going to go ahead and choose the green check mark either on the left-hand side. On the left-hand side, because on the right-hand side it has a let's go back to start icon or accept the command. So we're just going to choose the green check mark as an OK. So now we've drawn a rectangle, and the next shape that we're going to create, we're going to hit that sketch tool. Maybe I'll pin this so that way it doesn't go anywhere. So I've now pinned it so it doesn't go anywhere, and you'll notice that this features in the sketch are now on the bottom. We're going to draw a circle. So we're going to pick a circle, and we're going to pick the middle of this left-hand line. Now, when I came up to that, it gave me the middle location, and it now is highlighted by that yellow dot next to the green vertical constraint. That's telling me that it made sure that that line was vertical. But it will find the middle point automatically for us, and so we're going to draw a circle from the middle point out to the edge. That's it. We don't have to worry about measurements. We just have to draw from the middle out to the edge. So now it's starting to look like an NBA free throw line, or high school free throw line if you want to throw that in, but basically a basketball free throw line. That's a good start. So we have some extra lines in here that we don't need based on the shape that we were looking at. If you take a look, here's the shape. Okay, we've got basically a rectangle. We're not going to worry about this cutout area just yet. We basically created a rectangle, and now we've drawn a circle in here, but we don't need all the stuff in the middle. We need to draw a circle in the middle. So let's talk a little bit about a tool called trim. The trim tool gets rid of objects that we don't want, and it basically nibbles at it. So we pick the trim tool, and we can nibble this half of the circle, that half of the arc. Or we can nibble this line. Now it's going to tell me that that line was part of an existing shape. Okay. Yes, we're going to go ahead and delete the relationship. Why? Because the shape that I need to create has that open area in the middle, and we don't have that line connecting down to the bottom. And as I said, we're not worried about the circle right now because we're just drawing shapes. Or we're not worried about the size of the object, we're just drawing in shapes. So let's go ahead and add the circle in the middle, and you can see the little hash mark that's there. We're going to go ahead and pick that hash mark and draw in a circle. And then finally, we've got to do that little cutout on the end. And I'm going to show you a really easy way to do that. There's some tools that are available inside SolidWorks that makes drawing basic shapes pretty easy. Like, for example, this rectangle tool. And under rectangle, there's different ways that we can draw the rectangle. Whether it's a corner and a corner, a center and a corner, or a 3-point, or a different 3-point connectivity, which is a midpoint, center, and an end. So there's different ways for us to create that rectangle. But we're going to go the corner rectangle, which are just the 2 dots on the corner. And what we're going to do is we're going to start the dot on the inside here. You can see where my pencil's located. I'm just going to left mouse click and release. And we're going to move my pencil to the outer edge here. And we just did it as a diagonal move. And again, we're going to left mouse click and release, and we're going to create the shape, the rectangle shape. Well, you know where we're going with this. We like the rectangle shape. We know that the rectangle shape has got to look like this when we're finished, so we're going to use the trim tool again and clean it up. So we'll accept the rectangle, which is many times when you're in the middle of doing a feature creation like that, or a sketch creation that's going to generate the feature, you have to choose the green check mark to accept it. And so when we accept it, we now can use the trim tool and nibble away at the things that we don't need. Now, what happens if you nibble away something you don't want, or that you actually do want? Okay, so let's do that. Let's delete something that we actually want to save. So if I nibble here and go, oh man, I really wanted to save that. Well, if you remember, we've got that undo option up here, and it reverses the last action that we did. So I hit undo, and guess what? It gets rid of the trim command. It reverses the action of the trim command and eliminates it. So that undo is a perfect way to fix things when they go awry. So we're going to go back to trim again, and this time we're going to pick the correct side and nibble away the outer edge of that rectangle that we don't need, and then we just need to nibble the inside here. Perfect. Now you've created the shape that we have to develop. Okay, it's not to the right size, but that's okay. We're not worried about the size just yet. We'll get to the size here in a minute. Right now we're focusing on the shape. Now that we've got the shape correct, we now need to add some dimensions, otherwise known as constraints. Couple of things first. If you hit the escape key, that guarantees that you're out of all these commands. We have to accept that trim, though, that we just did before we hit the escape key to make sure we're out. Now that we're out of all of our commands, we can start adding dimensions. And here's a tip. So the tip that I have is start with the most critical dimensions on your drawing. For example, when we look at this particular drawing, we've got 0.375, 0.375, and 0.375, all for this rectangular shape. Those are the first three dimensions I'm going to place. It's not necessarily that they're the smallest, but if we don't put these dimensions in to hold the shape may turn into something we don't like. And if it does, don't worry. Always hit the undo, and then you're fine. We'll pick the Smart Dimension tool, and we'll pick the line. Now, if you try to pick the line in the middle, you're going to get the midpoint anchor. So what we try to do is avoid that midpoint anchor and pick just a below or above. And this particular one is 0.21. So we click on that, and it pops up and says, do you really want the 0.21? Well, if we go back to our drawing shape, we know that that needs to be 0.375. So we'll type in 0.375 and hit the enter key. And that's going to change the shape. But look what happened. It shrunk the other side. Oh no. So we've got to do a couple of things here. Number one, we can roll the wheel on the mouse, and that'll magnify the drawing shape so it's a little bit larger for us. Number two, I think we might need to edit this 1.38 diameter now and make it the proper size. When we created this 0.375 dimension, it then drove the shape to be a larger shape because we drew it smaller than what we need. So if that's the case, then we need to do an overall dimension. Well, that overall dimension is the outside, and that's a diameter of 0.250. So how do we do that? Well, we'll accept the first dimension we put in, and what we'll do is we'll hit the escape key first, then click on the numbers of that dimension, and with that number we're going to type in 2.50. Okay, so now this thing looks all weird. Okay, kind of bloated, like we added some extra space here, and we did at the bottom. But we know that the top and the bottom are the same size. So now we can add the 0.375 on the bottom by using the Smart Dimension tool and editing the shape. So now it looks much better. We're not there yet, but we're getting close. We'll add the dimension in here, which is the 0.375 to the line here. And you might be wondering, well, why is it going 0.38 and not 0.375? Well, if we take a quick look over here, there is the ability to change the tolerance or the precision. Tolerance is the top, the precision is the bottom. So we could go and set 3 decimal place precision. And we'll go back and fix these in just a second. But you can see that's where we can set up, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 decimal places, is over on the side. Alright, we also have a dimension from the back to the center of the circle. And that's 1.50. So we're going to pick the line. Again, don't pick the middle, but we're going to pick the line, left mouse click and release. And we're going to pick the circle edge, left mouse click and release. That's got to be 1.50. So then we click and anchor the dimension location, type in 1.50, and that shifts the space a little bit. Okay, so we're getting close now to having all the dimensions that are here on the shape. The other dimension is from the bottom line to the center of the circle. So, bottom line, don't pick the middle, but pick the bottom line. Pick the circle, and we want to make it 1.25. And 1.25. Perfect. If you noticed, it cleaned up this corner. This was kind of a little bit ragged. If I hit the undo, let's take a look. Okay, so you can see how this is a little bit ragged down here, that this isn't really clean. And when we put in that last dimension of the 1.25, all I'm doing is using the wheel mouse and magnifying and demagnifying. So we pick the bottom, pick the circle, bring it over to the side here, and 1.25. And it cleans it up. Alright, now that we're done with our basic dimensioning shape, we still have the 0.76 to deal with, and we'll fix that here in a second. The other thing we could do, and you'll notice that we've got a little tail on this 0.250. We'll show you how to get rid of that here in just a second. Let's double check to make sure we have all of our dimensions. Double check, 1.25, 375, up. We've got an overall dimension that's missing of 0.250. So, we need to do that. To do that, what we're going to do is, again, we're still in the Smart Dimension. We're going to pick the top line. We'll pick the bottom line. We'll come out here to 0.250, and it might give us a pop-up. Nope, it likes our 0.250, or excuse me, 2.50. I said 0.250. Let me correct myself. 2.50, and choose OK. Alright, so now we've got all of our dimensions. We can choose the green check mark again to accept them. And now that we've chosen the green check mark and we're out of the dimension command, I'll show you another little thing that you can do. We can left mouse click and hold. So we click and hold, and we're able to drag the 0.25 dimension to a nice location. One that isn't right on the edge. We can do the same thing with the 0.76 and actually bring it out of the drawing shape. And you'll notice that I've placed all these dimensions on the outside of the shape, and that's a good general rule to follow. I'll clean this up, and we'll bring this a little bit closer so it's not way out in space. And the same with the 0.38. We're going to bring these in a little bit and kind of align them up. Okay, so now when we choose the 0.38, okay, it says 0.375. We accepted that, but when we click on this dimension, I'm able to change its precision to 3 decimal places. And I can do the same thing here, clicking on the dimension, change it to 3 decimal places. Hit the escape, we're done. Last dimension. Last dimension is a 1.25 inch inside circle. This one's 0.76. So we click on that. We double click, we get the value that pops up, 1.25. Hit the enter key, and there we have it. We've now created it. So what's our next step? Obviously you want to save your work. You want to hit the save button or save as and save your work. Once you've saved your work, then go to the features tool. Many times you get to this spot and you jump to the features immediately and you forget to save. Make sure you save your work once you get it to the right location. 1.39, that seems kind of weird. I don't have any weird dimensions. It should be 1.50. Yeah, so that was kind of odd, because I knew that all the dimensions were all round numbers. And so that, again, kind of cleaned that whole thing up. So you just want to verify to make sure that all your dimensions are set. And once they are, now we're able to hit the save button again and just save it over the last one. And if we hit the save button, when we hit the save button, the window pops up. We can give it a name, and we'll call this I'm going to call it Model Week 1. You can call it whatever you'd like. I always like to be as descriptive as possible, so when I go back and look for something, I know what I'm looking for, or it's like, oh yeah, that's what I need. So we're going to hit save. Now, once it's saved, we'll go to the features tool and extrude the shape. So when we extrude the shape, all we're doing, and if you had a Play-Doh toy when you were young and you squeezed the Play-Doh, or you had clay and you squeezed the clay, you're basically extruding that through your fingers. Or if you had Play-Doh, a lot of times it had little dies that you could extrude it into a star or a rectangle or a square. But this is now saying, well, how big is this? Well, if we look back at our original drawing, the thickness of this part was 0.75. Over on the left-hand side, right now the thickness is telling me that it's 0.10. So if I click in that window and type in 0.75 and hit the enter key, it's now 0.75. But notice that it's in yellow. And what that means is that it's still not totally committed until we hit the green check mark. And notice this time there is a green check mark on the right-hand side or the left-hand side. But until we hit the green check mark, it's not done. And once we do that, it'll then create the 3D model for us. So we'll choose the green check mark. And now we've got our solid model. All right. Now your first project asks you to save your work as different types of things. So you can save it as a solid part, but if you hit the down arrow, we're also able to save it as a Adobe portable document format, which is a PDF file. That's what PDF stands for, portable document format. So you're able to save this image into a PDF. And I believe that's what the homework recommends, is that you save it as a solid part and then also save it as a PDF. To do that, just hit the drop down, pick PDF. It'll save it as the same name as the original part. Okay, but you can see that the PDFs are a different component, so it has a different list of options. So you can save that as a PDF, and all that does is bring up as a portable document is an image of what you're actually creating. All right, that's it. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.